Thank you, Ambassador. I will take the last two, Mustafiz and Upali over there. Mustafiz in the front. And definitely Salim over there.
Thank you, Chair. My compliments to Vaqar and the panel. My point was with regard to the disparity. Now, a few decades back, there was a lot of research on the rural-urban resource transfer through the terms of trade between the rural commodities, agricultural commodities, and the manufacturing commodities through the credit market. So I was interested to know whether that rural-urban resource transfer discourse is now irrelevant, or it is once again emerging, given that we are providing so much support to the agricultural commodities now, you know, the food, right to food bills, etc. It will have important implications on the farm prices as well. So what will be happening with regard to the terms of trade between manufactured commodities and agricultural commodities, and through that, whether there will be resource transfer? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Upali over there.
Thank you, Chair. This question relates to agglomeration issues that some of you mentioned. In fact, most of the countries that we have seen transformation have also gone through sort of a structural transformation in terms of spatial organization. Particularly if you look at the developed countries in the 18th or 19th centuries, or countries like South Korea in the 60s, 70s. And these agglomeration economies can in fact lead to reducing the per unit service provision costs, which can lead to, in fact, provide better services at cheaper rates. If we think of letting people to move from rural areas to, let's say, urban centers so that better services can be provided. I think one of the best examples that I can provide is the Canadian education policy in the earlier period that in fact encourage people to move from rural areas to urban centers so that better education facilities can be provided. I don't see that sort of a discourse in South Asia. I would like to see your response to that.
Thank you. I have Salim Ahmed over here and Dr. Nadimul Haq.
Salim Ahmed from Bangladesh. I would have spoken about the gender disparity, but we have a separate session, so I am not speaking about that. But I would like to differ with Mr. Zaidi Sattar, because as he's spoken about the service sector growth in Bangladesh, I think and Bangladesh is really growing on the service sector, especially on the construction arena, then recruitment agency, and the hotel, restaurant. So this is another area where Bangladesh is really flourishing. And also, if I talk about the women entrepreneurs, normally women entrepreneurs used to do used to be involved in the traditional handicrafts. But now, mostly we have seen, especially in the semi-urban areas, they are coming mostly in beauty parlors, restaurant, catering. So service sectors in Bangladesh actually is growing. Thank you so much.
Thank you for highlighting the growing service industries in Bangladesh. This will definitely be the last one.
Thank you, Ji. Nadimul Haq from Pakistan. I just have two very small points, one of which I think Rajiv has already mentioned, so I don't want to dilate on it. But I do find that in South Asia, one of the reasons that we don't grow is because we don't want growth. Whenever the word growth is mentioned in South Asia, any forum, people rush in to say inclusive, sustainable, green, intra-country disparities, inequality. We have so many adjectives for growth. By the time we get to growth, the politicians have lost interest. You talk about democracy, talk about politics. Remember, politicians don't have a long attention span. If you qualify growth by so many things, there will be no growth in the country because the politicians are preoccupied with other things, food security and this and that, etc. Now, the second point is on Vaqar's paper. Vaqar, you took the approach of trends and game changers. But I'm not quite comfortable with that. I think if you look at the constraints to growth, they're common in South Asia. South Asia still is the most resistant to reform in the world. In most South Asian countries, governance remains that what the colonial master left us. Reform has not been completed in any area. We still worship agriculture. We still are thinking in terms of sector management and command-led growth. So I think those are also trends in thinking that you should think about. For example, the minister made a point about economists being, writing books and nothing happens. But if you recall the famous Keynes' statement that even madmen and dictators are following a defunct economist, that we are all enslaved by some past economic theory. I think we need to break out of that tradition. Let's not be enslaved by past economists. Let's look to the future. Let South Asia come out and look to the future. And that future, Vaqar, is the constraints to growth which are common in South Asia, wherein lies something very important that we can all study. Thank you.
Thank you very much. What happened? What does that flag means? We are through?
This flag is for you.
How much time do we have?
10 minutes. 10 minutes.
No. We are going to film a bit more and then we will edit it, so that it comes within the time. So that's how we're going to. We started 10 minutes late and we will get 5 minutes at least out of it. And you will have a bit less caffeine afterwards. I think these 8 interventions from the floors were fantastic. And some of them are not necessarily in the same direction. And obviously some of them have challenged the panelists, their propositions which they have put in. So these are all good success indicators of the discussion. Now I will bring in first Vaqar. There's discussion about service-led growth. And I just wanted to clarify one point that, what we are trying to, the two other issues which came up, that commercialization of agriculture, productivity growth in agriculture. The other part of inclusive growth, if I am allowed to say that, then labor-intensive manufacturers, globalization of the manufacturing industry, these are considered to be the other element. But if you look at the incremental growth which is happening in these countries, the contribution of the manufacturing and the crop sector or the non-crop sector, whether won't you consider they are much more higher than the incremental contribution of the service sector, although the service sector as a share in the GDP is higher. So please, if you like to defend yourself on your future projection of structural transformation of the economies in South Asia.
I think it wasn't about taking sides, it was more about throwing a question, but I think...
Microphone, please.
Yeah. So I think the way I would like to put it is, of course, that there are 3 things. First, we are very narrowly defining the services sector. It is not the traditional national income accounts that we are talking about. It's not just the transportation, the banking, the social services that are adding up to become the social sector, services sector valuation. The second is that we don't actually know the potential of services sector truly because a large part of it exists in the informal economy. And that I think is debatable whether services sector is not providing inclusivity in strictly livelihood terms because there is a large part that it absorbs over there. Now, in case of Pakistan and to a certain extent India as well, and I'll let, of course, the Bangladesh case to be put on the table, of course. The largest, and this is the third point, the largest amount of FDI that has actually came in the past 1 decade, that was services. And of course, a lot has been written about the determinants, that why it was only the services. But at the end of the day, and
sector in that way, it is a continuum of activities from petty trading to high-valued financial services in that way. So what services we are talking about, what exactly will be the business development supported services, and whether we are talking about energy services and also transport services over there. These are all critical issues. Definitional issues are also very important, relevant in this particular, but we have highlighted one particular point very strongly over here. I have number of important issues which you have to deal with it in a very short period of time. On the issue of agglomeration, Dr. Coomaraswamy, would you like to take 15-20 seconds to respond?
Sorry, what was the exact
the agglomeration? Did you listen to Pali's question?
What was the, which one was that? Whose question, sir?
It would be number 6.
Wow.
Because Vaqar has taught me number game.
If,
so
you can repeat it for me, then what was the question exactly?
Pali, would you please, in your own words, 1 second. Speak out, speak out. Don't wait for the microphone.
Yeah.
The question is actually, when you refer to agglomeration economy,
yes.
Actually, we can think of other way around, promoting, in fact, agglomeration as a way to reduce per unit cost of providing services.
Yeah.
Which can, in fact, provide better services at a cheaper price.
So, scaling up and the other issues over there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, clearly the whole, that WDR, the whole rationale behind the argument that they made was that urbanization helps with economies of agglomeration. It helps with creating economic density, and therefore it drives down, economies of agglomeration drives down unit costs. Economic density helps you to be competitive in a globalized economy, and therefore urbanization is good, and disparities are not necessarily bad. In fact, they may even be necessary to accelerate growth. I think that was basically the argument. May I make a very quick thing on growth?
I will come to the growth issue a bit later. Please don't open it up. It's a Pandora's box.
Fine.
I will come to that. There were two very concrete issues from the current economy. One referring to the extractive industry, other on the currency issue. Anis bhai, currency issues in India.
An extractive one? At the same time, extractive one?
No, please on the currency issue. 1 minute, 2 minutes, whatever.
Yeah,
what is the projection? Should we buy or we should sell?
That I can't tell you, because then I'll be liable for something. The currency crisis that you are seeing now is not to the proportion of what you have seen in the Asian financial crisis. That's the simple answer to it. This is basically a reflection of this is a kind of reflection of the so-called quantitative easing, and now the Americans are saying that they might be clawing back some of this, so some overreaction to this as well. And also this shows the very fundamental thing that somehow opening up the capital account, the capital will flow in, and then somehow it will lessen our foreign exchange constraint. That hypothesis has been proven wrong now by all these events. I mean, we have to generate our own foreign currency, and that's why most of the countries are accumulating reserves, and that brings back to the question of whether we can have a regional arrangement for that, and these are the issues that we have to look at.
Thank you.
Would it also be true to say that as long as your current account of the balance of payments is okay, you're not going to be very vulnerable?
Yeah.
It's those countries which have a problem on the current account of the balance of payments that will be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Thank you on that. Rural-urban resource transfer.
Okay. This issue of resource transfer is a very interesting one. That's why I wanted to pick up. Nepal's economy largely depends on remittance. Over 3.5 million Nepali, especially youth, are out of the country. They send money. And it has very interesting effect on this resource transfer. It comes to the country, and particularly it goes to rural areas to support the livelihood of the people. There is not much production. As a result, what happens, urban areas or even countries, they supply produces to Nepal, and the urban areas produces even basic goods to rural areas. Okay. Here we see a challenge as to how to sustain this whole economy, and also opportunity in that if we were able to increase the production through whatever means that I mentioned before in rural areas, then probably we'll be able to sort of retain part of this resource.
Is agricultural price, the agricultural commodity price is an issue here?
Yes, it's an issue, and it's also major issue regarding trade with our trade partners, particularly with India.
Okay, thank you very much. Our Honorable Member of Parliament, Mr. Daniel Aziz, raised the issue of extractive industry. I'm pretty sure that he also knows the answer, the resource scarce issue over here. Everybody knows that if we don't get it right within a right regulatory framework, then the same thing will happen in Afghanistan, which has happened in Africa, in other countries, starting from Nigeria and thereafter. We can continue with the discussion during the coffee period, if you allow me. And I want to conclude with two issues which have been left now to me. One is this whole growth and its definitions in many ways. That is something I would like to bring to Professor Sobhan, where Rajiv has mentioned that whether we should at all bother about inequality, discrimination, disparity, or you should be talking only about growth. As long as it is high, it is good enough for everything else in that. And poverty reduction. No, I think that is an misdebate. Everybody understands the distinction between poverty alleviation and inequality issue. The point
It has to go with poverty reduction, with good governance.
Yes, let me come to that. I think the new consensus which we are coming from, this inclusive growth, is that growth is important. It has to be high. Good governance is important also. It will lead to poverty alleviation. But these are all essential, but not enough. That is the point over here. Is that that enough part we should emphasize, or we shouldn't emphasize? That is the point over here. That if I get the point. And Nadimul Haq also alluded partly to that making this complicated. So on that, and then I will go back to the minister to end, because Nadimul Haq raised the issue that South Asia is the most reform-resistant geographical location now in the world. I don't know whether in comparison to Latin America or any other sub-Saharan country, we are more resistant. That is the psychological profile we get. So that is what, and so we can get to the minister on that. So please, on the growth and inequality.
I must say that for someone who is wanting to emancipate himself from the ghosts of defunct economists, I am happy to note that Nadeem and Rajiv still seem to be enslaved by the ghosts of the Washington Consensus. So, as I said, a bit of emancipation would do you no harm over there, Nadeem. Now, the relevant point is about this whole growth discourse, which we used to actually have in the 1950s, and that it is now resurrected in 2013, shows how little has changed in the world. Now, the relevant point is not whether you should have growth or not. Everyone wants growth. Who doesn't want growth? Relevant question is, growth for you two is a number. From 7 to 8 is growth. You teach that to your students. You have little models to regress this against import liberalization reforms, and then you show that this is how you get growth. The relevant point is who creates growth, what comes out of growth. In fact, the Kisan with 2 acres of land is contributing to growth, but there is no macroeconomic agenda for that Kisan to show whether, in fact, he has an incentive structure which will get him to double that growth, when he has access to resources, which will make him contribute to that growth. The SMEs, which account for 80 to 90%, if you see the coming paper by Mustafiz and Wazim tomorrow, of all our industrial enterprises are just one big black box for whom there is really no policy design as to how you're going to make them contribute to growth. But obviously, if you can in fact get people who are operating with a sort of small karkhana with a lathe, there are many ways in which you can enhance that person's productivity and get them to contribute to growth. So the relevant point is, how do you in fact get large numbers of people who are actually contributing to growth, but who in fact have no opportunity to participate in that because there is no goddamn agenda coming from the Washington Consensus and the heirs to in fact put that issue on the table.
That was a red flag to the growth. Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Minister, the last... Is the organizer giving me 5 more minutes? No, no, minister will come. Minister will come. Oh, after the minister's speech, okay. So there will be only time for national anthem. Please, Mr. Minister.
Well, I would say that moments of crisis are also moments of opportunity, because when nothing else is working, you have to go for new forms or reforms. In case of many countries where growth is coming despite reforms, so you know, the usual thinking would be that why reform? It is working, so why should we change? In our case, in Pakistan, we have serious problems of growth as well as crisis. And I think we are reflecting, we have done a lot of introspection, and we think that reforms is the answer. And just to highlight, the ministry I'm heading, we have changed the scope from traditional planning and development to planning, development and reform ministry, so that it becomes the focal point of pushing the cross-sectoral reforms which we need to pursue, whether it is civil service reform, whether it is modernization. And I would say in our public sector governance, I would support your governance theme. There are two very important elements which we need to reform. One, our traditional governance structures are not designed to work in collaborative mode. As we have seen that new power centers have emerged, there is an urgent need to transform our governance to take into account these new centers of power and be more engaging and collaborative. And secondly, in our traditional governance programs, models, there is no performance per se, you know, as a value. The whole system, whether if you have, you know, say 50 deputy commissioners, the chief secretary would have no criteria, objective criteria, to see that who are his top 10% performing deputy commissioners and which are bottom 10% performing deputy commissioners. If you are Inspector General of Police, you have no objective criteria to evaluate your best police officers or the worst police officers. So I think this whole performance debate has to be at the heart of the governance agenda because of the resources we don't have. And finally, Daniel question, I think one of the capacities which we are lacking in our area is the public-private partnership models also, with relation to certainly the regulatory frameworks which are missing, but the states have run out of their capacity to invest in new industries and technologically intensive, which are capital-intensive industries. So now there has to be a greater role for private sector, but still our private-public partnership models are not very strong where it can attract the kind of investment we need to have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. And I would like all of you to join in appreciating our panelists and also those who have made the intervention and those who have listened to us also carefully. My parting line is that growth is necessary. All these things are all very important. But disparity cannot be a fact of life. Discrimination, disparity, marginalization, these cannot be a fact of life. If we cannot change it, if a single person, able-bodied person, looking for a job and cannot find it, then we have vulgarized our growth process in one way or another. We will have to achieve that particular moment. If we have not achieved that, as an economics professional, I will feel very much disappointed and let down. Let us change it from that point of view. Thank you very much. Have a good coffee.